Alright guys, it's Sienna back with a new video on Jeremy Ethier. He says how many sets you actually need to maximize growth. So, a set builds a muscle. Alright, let's see how many sets to build a muscle.
How many sets do you really need to build muscle? Some say just one set, taken to all out failure is best, whereas others preach high volume, doing 4 to 5 sets per exercise and taking over 3 hours to complete a single workout.
Wow, that's quite a bit. Bench press, that's okay. Arnold chest day, 3 sets, 4 sets. Yeah, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger, but you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're a natural channel, man. You don't take drugs and you're not a bodybuilder, fake bodybuilder on stage. So you're not taking artificial hormones to create an artificial look, but you are creating an artificial look because sets don't build muscles, but they do build artificial muscles called inflammatory muscles, inflaming those muscles through inflammatory response. Yes, my friend, and maybe some glycogen loading there, yes, loading and unloading.
Who's right? And more importantly, how many sets should you do, especially as a natural?
This is exactly what I'm talking about. How many sets do you need to build an inflammatory response muscle? A growth and inflammatory response. How many sets do you need? Well, he says you need 1 set. See what I mean? 1 set will build a muscle through inflammatory response. Okay, all the way to failure. Interesting.
Well, the answer might surprise you, and is probably a lot less than you're currently doing. The first major analysis on how the number of sets you do affects muscle growth was done in 2017.
Like I've seen that before, the sets in affecting muscle growth. No set builds a muscle. That's all I know, but it will build an artificial muscle, temporary.
Team, led by researcher Brad Schoenfeld. They compared 1 to 5, 5 to 9, and 10 plus sets per muscle per week. So for example, 6 weekly sets for the chest could be 3 sets of bench and 3 sets of flies. And what they discovered is a dose-response relationship between muscle growth and the number of sets performed, with 10 plus sets per muscle per week resulting in the most.
See that? 10 plus gives you more inflammatory response per week as opposed to 1 to 5, 5 to 9. So the more you do, the more inflammation you get in those muscles. So the muscles will grow through inflammatory response. This is wonderful.
Growth. After this meta-analysis was published, pretty much all of us fitness nerds were under the impression that more volume was better. Almost instantly, I bumped up the number of sets on all my exercises. Unfortunately, it didn't end up skyrocketing my gains the way I hoped it would. It wasn't until more research
Oh, that's unfortunate, man.
came out did I realize the mistake I made. You see, while this analysis did suggest that more was better, it didn't let us know just how far we could push it while still continuing to see better gains. Fortunately, 6 years later, a new group of researchers decided to perform a similar analysis. This time, they compared
Oh, a new researcher is going to perform a new analysis just for you. Inflammatory muscles, yes.
lower volumes of less than 12 sets, moderate volumes of 12 to 20 sets, and high volumes of more than 20 sets per muscle per week.
Wow, 20 sets per muscle per week. Yes, we got to get more of that inflammation in there.
They also standardized the data by only looking at sets performed within 6 to 20 reps. The result? Well, although moderate and high volumes led to more growth compared to low volumes, in almost all the muscles measured, there were no significant differences between the two. The one exception was the triceps, which responded better to higher volumes, but we'll talk more about what this means later on. But overall, this analysis suggests there may be some kind of upper limit, where too much volume doesn't lead to more growth, and in some cases might even hinder growth because of recovery issues. The sweet spot seems to be somewhere within the range of 10 to 20 sets per month.
See, that's the sweet spot. It hinders getting more inflammatory response muscles in there.
Muscle per week, but this is still a very wide range. 20 sets is double the time and work compared to 10 sets. To find where exactly within this range is best for you, there's 5 other factors you need to consider. The first of which is your individual response. So the studies we covered earlier, while they do provide us with great insight, they look at averages to see what the best general recommendation is. But in the case of volume, it seems to be highly individual. Illustrating this is a 2019 study from the Journal of Sports Science, where they had 19 participants train one leg with 6 to 9 sets per week and their other leg with 15 sets per week. After 8 weeks, roughly a third of the participants had a leg that responded better from low volume, a third had a leg which responded better from high volumes, and a third had a similar response in both legs, suggesting that what one person can recover well and grow from may end up being too much for someone else. Now later in this video, I'll show you guys how to determine if what you're currently doing is too much.
Recovering, that's too much work, but you still get that inflammatory response, right, Jeremy?
Or too little for you. But one thing that will play a big role in that is exercise execution. Max Uceda, a 22-year-old natural bodybuilder, experienced this firsthand. It was probably...
Max Uceda, eh? Oh, cool.
It was probably 30 to 40 sets per muscle group per week. For example, a chest day, I was doing every chest movement I could think of. Upper chest flies, incline bench press, flat bench press. All these sets were sloppy. And, I wasn't actually taking the muscles to failure. I tell myself, all right, 30 reps of bicep curls, and I'll stop once I hit 30. And in my last 15, I was just swinging up and down. It was a mess. Eventually I got to a point where months down the line,
This is stupid, man. I don't know.
and I just wasn't seeing any progress in terms of, my lifts weren't going up. I wasn't putting on any muscle. So now I'm doing anywhere from 7 to 12 sets per week per muscle group.
Well, what do you mean putting on muscle? You mean putting on real muscle or putting on inflammatory response? You weren't putting on any more muscle because the inflammation can only get so much. You can only get so much inflammation. That's why you're not putting on any more muscle. That inflammatory response can't blow up, keep blowing up even more. Now, your problem is you want to go to failure to try to blow it up as much as possible. Now, get it to its maximum, but you can't blow up any more than that, dude. What's going on here?
As opposed to, 30 plus. I've definitely seen the most growth I've ever seen in terms of, training.
Yeah, you look good for an ectomorph, very thin body fat, and a nice pump, and some psychoplasmic hypertrophy, and a nice inflammatory response there.
Quote unquote, a lower volume than.
This is what you get from chronic lifting. If you're a chronic lifter, this is the look you're going for. It's an inflammatory response. You constantly are inflaming the muscles. See, he's like a lower volume than normal.
Normal, and the thing that really helped me do that is training very close to failure, because
I think people are so confused about what builds or how to build muscle. What causes it? How does you grow it? What do you do with it?
when you're training very close to failure, your muscles just won't need that many sets. But when that set gets hard,
this has nothing to do with real muscle building. Like in real muscle building is totally, they don't, in real muscle building, even in science, if you want to use science, a study is on how muscle grows. They don't say anything about sets or reps or anything. These studies are meant for fabricated stuff, artificial muscle growth. This isn't for real muscle growth. Yeah, there's only two types that actually really build muscle, and there's two types that build. Look, there's two types that. One type that is in the process of building muscle, but one type works for both types. In other words, it's hard to really explain this. There's one type that causes some specific thing to the muscles, and then only one thing that you have to do to grow that muscle, and another type of hypertrophy. So there's two types of hypertrophy. One includes hyperplasia hypertrophy. The other one is just hypertrophy, but that type of hypertrophy is based on real muscles, and only one thing will do that and work for the other, because without that one ingredient, those two can't really grow at all. The other one can become apoptotic, apoptosis, and the other one, well, there could be a breakdown constantly. It could be breaking down, actually losing muscle if you don't add this one ingredient. So yeah, but the artificial stuff, loading, unloading, artificial inflammatory response, and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is artificial muscle growth.
You need to maintain good form. If your form is breaking down to where you're using momentum and your reps are getting super sloppy, then you're not taking.
Like he's average at best. He's tiny in a shirt. Like he doesn't even look like he lifts in a shirt. He's just like doing exercises. Got a really low body fat. He's a really skinny guy.
muscles to failure. So the last thing I did when it comes to, lowering my volume that really helped was taking longer rest periods, because obviously, when you're training.
Yeah, if you're taking longer rest periods in between, you have more of a chance to recover quickly, to lift those weights, to cause more inflammatory response in the muscles. That's the whole point. Chronic lifting. Chronic lifting isn't based on periodic lifting. If you chronically lift, you get inflammatory muscles. If you periodically lift, well, then you get something else. See? Bodybuilding's technical.
Very hard and very intensely, your muscles just need to require more rest. I think when you maintain proper technique and you take your muscle.
That's why I say Jeremy Ethier's whole channel is based on inflammatory muscles and sarcoplasmic. It's based on artificial muscle growth, actually. His entire channel is based on that. And that's why it's so popular at 5.97 million. If you could tell everybody that, these sets build muscles, these reps, this, that builds a muscle, do this for your muscles, they'll get bigger, do this, do that. They won't understand what you're talking about. They'll just think, oh yeah, reps build a muscle. But he doesn't mention what type of muscle growth is this. And if he was to tell you, you wouldn't watch him anymore. See what I mean? That is the difference. My channel could be popular if I could spew out the same bullshit too for everybody to watch. Make some fancy videos, make some exercise stuff, and tell you, yeah, these sets, these reps, this, that, blah, 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 to build a muscle. But what type is it? What if I told you it was inflammatory response muscles? Would you keep watching me? Would you come back? No, of course not. Jeremy Ethier couldn't tell you the truth. You wouldn't come back and watch him anymore.
To failure, then pair that with a lower volume approach, you're doing everything that you need to do without going overboard and creating all of this fatigue and creating all this muscle damage that needs to be recovered from.
This aligns with my own experience as well.
Why do you think people backstage in the Mr. Olympia, they're all pumping up? They call it the pump up room. What are they doing? Pumping up. Yeah, inflammatory response to go on the stage with inflamed muscles. That's the whole basis. They just keep it up, keep it up. They do some carb loading. Why aren't they doing protein? Why aren't they loading with protein? Think about this. If protein builds muscles, then why don't these professional bodybuilders on stage, why do they carb up before they go on stage? Because they're pumping up their muscles artificially. Why do they pump them up as well? Because they want to get an inflammatory response plus pumping the glycogen in there after they've eaten all these carbohydrates. That is the whole point, to artificially induce hypertrophy through an artificial means. Yeah, man, that's what you're all doing.
Actually push yourself close to failure on all your sets while maintaining good form, and you'll get way more out of less. But Max also...
Look how small he is. It's just an inflammatory response on his skinny little body. This guy too. He's got a little bit of a pump, some glycogen in there. It's artificial, and inflamed muscles, because a good majority of people are doing inflammatory response training, I call it. Yeah, well, he's got a nice Atlantis board. I got one of those in my gym.
Mentioned, he ended up taking longer rest periods between his sets, which is another factor that will affect how much volume you need to grow. If you take shorter rest between...
How much volume do you need to grow through this inflammatory response and glycogen loading? How much will you grow? But again, it's temporary. Glycogen loading is also temporary, and so is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. It's kind of temporary. You have to keep pumping it to get it in there. It's an energy source. It isn't based on making proteins. So yeah, and the fact that you're moving weights around, you get a type of gravitational loading. But every time you stop loading, there's an unloading. When you go home and you sleep in your bed, there's an unloading. You're spending hours in bed sleeping, you're not on the ground, so there's an unloading.
In sets, such as less than 2 minutes, research suggests you'll need to do more sets to get the same amount of growth as you would from taking longer rests. And unfortunately, the research does come up with that 20 range would be best as one full set for that muscle. So for example, during the...
I mean, here is his, what is he lifting there? 25-pound weight. See, 25? Are they 25? I think they're 25 pounds. 25 pounds on each side. He's really strong, isn't he?
Bench press, they'll count that as would fall under this category as well, unless you want to prioritize within a muscle. The chest, for example, doesn't need size, can work, and has worked for many people.
So, yeah, sure. So he shows these artificial bodybuilders taking artificial hormones, growing artificial muscles, sarcoplasmic, inflammatory, boom, gravitational loading and loading, boom, Man, this is ridiculous.
You see, in the research we covered, subjects would stop each set once they reached.
He's tiny, but he's an ectomorph. He's really small. I bet you if he measured his arms, there's really his forearms, his shoulders. He's really tiny. He's small. His chest around the size, really tiny. His arms are probably like 13, maybe 12 inches. They're like little kids' arms.
Failure or close enough to it. But Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia, who has popularized high-intensity training.
High intensity training, he was trying to load more glycogen and get more inflammatory response in his muscles. He was chronically lifting because he's a competitor in the Mr. Olympia, duh.
Describes his set as one.
There's no comparison. He's taking testosterone. Testosterone is known. I can prove this. You can watch a video on Dr. James. Go to his channel. He talks about steroids. He'll even corroborate this. Testosterone, glycogen loads. When you take testosterone, most people will take anabolics with testosterone, okay? They say, well, I got to build a muscle with this anabolic. No, anabolics, they cut you up. They don't build muscles. But they also can load some glycogen in there as well. They're more for cutting drugs, but the testosterone loads glycogen in the muscle. That's why you feel a heavy duty pump when you lift. People take shots of like, what is it, Sustanon 250, boom, the pumps are out of the world. So you're like, I'm growing muscle as I'm walking. You are growing muscle while you're walking. It's sarcoplasmic muscle, artificial muscle growth. You think you're growing that by eating one couple of pieces of like protein, it's gonna magically build? No, in the real world, protein synthesis still needs to exceed that breakdown, not steroids gonna exceed that breakdown. And if there's not enough protein, that steroid can't build any muscle. It's gotta have tools. Listen, the guy who's building your house across the street, if you don't give him material to build the house, what the fuck are you gonna build it with? You understand me? If there's not enough material, the house will not be built. Yeah. So if you're not eating enough protein, most of these guys know about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Their whole basis is just to get as big as possible and take cutting drugs to look good with low body fat as they're maintaining this glycogen in the muscle, this sarcoplasmic fluid in the muscle. That's the whole point. Oh man, people don't understand that. And getting a huge inflammatory response to look even bigger, as big as they could possibly look.
All-out set extended beyond failure with force reps, rest pause reps, or drop set reps. A set is properly finished only when additional movement is utterly impossible. So as you can imagine, one set performed in this fashion can very likely be the same time under tension and stimulus at 2 to 3 normal.
Right, how's that working for you, Jeremy Ethier? You look like a skinny skeleton. Look at you. You are so skinny and small, a skinny little kid. Oh.
Sets would provide. Lastly, and probably most importantly, not everyone should be doing what's optimal. Although somewhere within
what is optimal for getting more inflammation?
The 10 to 20 weekly set range, though 10 or more weekly sets less. If you're having trouble just being...
Can you imagine going to the gym all your life pretending that you're building muscle? Pretend. It's like these people, I told you, it's the imaginary world, the man's world. Acting police officer, acting judge and all that. You're pretending. They're pretending to have some authority to be something that they're not. They're wearing costumes. Why do you think they came up with Halloween? Because everybody can dress up as their favorite characters and pretend. Get it? Everybody has the chance to pretend in this world during Halloween. Superhero, a cop, or doctor, or lawyer, whoever the hell you want to dress up as. I don't know, a scarecrow. You get it, man? Because it's all pretend. You're pretending. You can pretend to build muscles. You can grow and build pretend muscles. You can do a whole bunch of things. Yeah, it's really easy. But to build real muscles, it has to be real. It has to be done within nature. It can't be faking or acting, faking. You can, if you truly want to build real stuff, you actually have to build it real. You can't fake it to build real. And real has more value than fake, believe me.
Consistent in the first place, don't chase optimal. Do what you can and realize you can still get great results with far less than you think. And at the end of the video, I am going to provide you guys with a free minimalist and optimal workout routine you can use with all...
Again, he's going to provide you with all these fake, minimalist, high volume, moderate volumes to get more inflammatory muscles and sarcoplasmic muscles. See what I mean? Because everybody knows that protein synthesis needs to exceed that breakdown. And if that is not exceeding, that is not building. I'm talking about real muscles in nature, how they're built. Yeah, you need real animal protein, high nutrient dense animal protein to build real muscle. You need money to build the body. Not your herbivore diet and just eating your regular diet. A lot of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates load a lot in the muscle fast, quickly as you're going in the gym, especially chronically lifting. Well, because this energy source is, there's a window too for glycogen loading. It's called glycogen synthesis. You have protein synthesis and glycogen synthesis. The problem is you're not exceeding this protein synthesis. You've got more glycogen in your diet than you do protein, and so that that glycogen synthesis window is open as well, and so you're loading a shitload of glycogen in there, especially chronically lifting. So you get a lot of this sarcoplasmic hypertrophy from loading this glycogen into the muscle, and you get a huge inflammatory response because you're a chronic lifter. So you're creating fake muscles. Yeah. How cute, eh?
All the science and the sets taken care of for you, but first we need to discuss how exactly to start applying all the research we've covered. First off, I'd recommend starting off at the low end of the 10 to 20 weekly set range.
Whatever.
Take longer rest periods, and it's very likely you'll start seeing better results despite doing far less than you were before.
You'll get more glycogen if you're a chronic lifter. Just doesn't matter what you do in the gym, as long as you do something. See what I mean? Chronically lifting. This doesn't take a genius to figure this out. It's not that hard to understand.
But eventually, as you get more experience, you may reach a point where your gains have completely stalled.
No, it just means that your body is reaching a point where it can't inflame. It can only inflame so much bigger. Then the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. You simply are still eating. You're not exceeding that energy drop in the sarcoplasm, the glycogen. You're still eating the same amount. So that's why it drops off. See what I mean? It drops off. But even real muscle have a point too of a nuclear domain, how far they could grow by adding these proteins to the fiber and mass. Yeah. It's very technical, yeah. All right.
Your body is actually ready for more volume. But before you make any changes, and see how you progress. Otherwise, you might actually be doing more than you can recover from and might need to take a break or decrease your...
Well, that just means you're exhausting yourself now, that's all. This whole recovery thing. You're just exhausted because you did too much of something of whatever.
Weekly volume. Now, since you stuck around for this long, I thought I'd leave you with a gift. I've created 3 different weekly workout plans. A quick 3-day per week minimalist routine with around 6 sets per muscle, a 4-day per week routine with 10 sets per muscle to potentially maximize gains, and a 5-day per week routine with around 14 sets per muscle for those who might need a little higher volume.
There you go. So he's built these programs for you to glycogen load, create some artificial muscles.
They're completely free.
They're completely free, exactly, because doing something artificial is free, bro. It's easy. Anybody can do this. Anybody can do that. See what I mean? I'll see you in the next one, man. Tell me what you think about that. Like, subscribe, support the channel.
You can grab these routines over at Built With Science.
You can grab them at his free website. See, Built With Science. Science. He didn't really prove. He didn't even say what this was or how a set can actually build a muscle. He's not really explaining a lot of the stuff to you. He just says a set. He just says how many sets actually need to maximize growth, to maximize this growth through sets. But sets, again, if it's through sets, I'll explain this. If you're growing through doing a set, that is artificial growth. You understand me? If you say that a set is growing a muscle that is artificial, it's inflammatory. It's kind of obvious. The set is causing an inflammatory response, so the muscles will grow through inflammation. They inflame. That's how they grow. And then you keep this inflammation by chronically lifting. And then your diet, part of your diet, because glycogen is loading in there because you're getting the pump. He didn't talk about that part either. That too has to do with sets. The sets and the reps, you do higher sets and reps, you're going to load more glycogen into the muscle and they'll look pumped. That's about it. And there's some gravitational loading, unloading. But if you're talking about real muscle, it's either you have to damage these muscle fibers, which is extremely complicated. You have to create some micro injuries to these fibers, and they got to do something specific. And then protein synthesis needs to exceed that, so you don't get an apoptosis. And then if you just want the mass, typical mass on the myofibrillar, which can't be done often either going to the gym chronically, you need time off to build up that mass in between workouts. So yeah, that protein still has to exceed that breakdown. See what I mean? That's why he's not saying protein synthesis exceed that breakdown going to build real muscle. He's telling you sets are going to, in his program, he's telling you that sets will build you a muscle in his program and in his channel. That's how he builds his inflammatory, fake, artificial muscles, doing that. See you in the next one, man. Ciao. Tell me what you think about that. Like, subscribe, support the channel. See you in the next one. Ciao, my friend. Inflammatory muscles.